Alright, well let me start off a little bit differently by making a concession, which is not really relevant to Mauler, but is independent of him, but is, somewhat relevant to the discussion. With the throne room, I'm going to refer to when the guards start attacking. One of them has Rey, and he seems to have two daggers at the beginning, but then later he only has one dagger. So that's a pretty jarring continuity error, or editing mistake, or an error in choreography, which, by the way, Mauler missed entirely. Like, he didn't even like the throne scene that much, but he missed the visual contradiction. So I'm not here to just defend every single thing in Last Jedi. I do think that with the throne room scene especially, because I do like it a lot, that does stick out because so much of it was actually well done and well choreographed, that if you suddenly see a missing dagger, yeah, that's a big problem. But now let's jump into part 3, and I'll concentrate on Poe, Finn, and Rose. The Poe thing I'll deal with very short and simply, where he's actually defending Poe and says his decisions were right because Holdo made no sense. But then, right, because they have quote-unquote plot armor, which is true in virtually all fiction, stories, so why bring it up? But that all the speeders are being shot down, and he orders Finn and Rose to back off and, not sacrifice themselves. And he says, well, that doesn't make sense, and they've destroyed the character, yada, yada, yada. I think the whole point of the character with Poe is he's learning the human cost of making sacrifices. So it's not a change or characterization or contradiction. It's just the character has changed their mind. So that's it. There's really not much more to say about this. But now jumping to what he does with Finn and Rose, that is a little bit more difficult. So now we have Finn going for the cannon, and Rose comes in famously or infamously to crash into him. And there are some issues here, but I don't think he brings up some good ones in terms of how did this happen. Like, we can ask, as he does, well, why didn't the AT-ATs just destroy Finn and destroy him? Well, there's a couple of reasons you could bring to bear. To say the most obvious ones, it could be that the AT-ATs just didn't consider one speeder a huge threat. I mean, threat would be because several speeders together might destroy the cannon, but one of them might not be much of a threat. Another would be that there's pretty strong shields on the speeder. Now that's a little wonky because the speeders are not very powerful, but that's possible in terms of how he's able to approach the cannon and not just have the whole speeder melt. There's also the third issue, which I want to be very careful on, but I would congratulate Ryan on this one, is that he's got force powers. So presumably at the unconscious level, he could just be basically giving the shields, what there is of it, some extra strength, and that's why he's able to approach the cannon. But this is all kind of not really relevant because, of course, the issue is really, why did Rose stop him and possibly endanger the resistance? And so whatever we think of it, it makes no sense logistically, and it doesn't make sense in terms of the plot, because she shouldn't be doing this. And then there's the infamous quotes at the end about love and saving what we love and yada, 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 and so on and so forth. So, well, in terms of Rose's decision-making, I really don't think there's actually much of an issue here. Right at the beginning, she thinks it's okay that Poe ordered her sister to die, because at that time, in the beginning of the film, she agreed with that decision-making. But by the end of the film, she disagrees. So, yeah, I don't see how this is much of an issue. Again, it's like the AT is not firing. It's only one speeder, so why would it matter, really? But, I mean, you can call it a plot hole, but I don't see much of it there. Now, an actual major plot issue might be, okay, fine, she decides to stop him because she's changed her mind, as has Finn, right? He's no longer as, concerned with himself. But how does she do it? Again, I want to be careful using the trick card of the force powers, but it is a fact that Finn has force powers, right? We see this in TFA, and it's confirmed in The Rise of Skywalker. Some people may not have caught that, but he does have force powers. So it could just be the force working its will. But even independent of that, you might say, well, okay, fine. And this is, I think, where Mauler, again, not surprisingly, is is wrong because the way he terms it is that Finn is not hurt, even after he's crashed into. That's not true. Right, he says Finn unhurt from this entire ordeal. No, he's hurt. We do see injuries on his face. So he's definitely damaged. Now, you might have a point with Rose, but we see her damaged as well. She is injured. I think the question would be, she should be unconscious or at least near death because she, presumably did break a few bones. But him being able to drag her back to the resistance base is not much of a huge thing because he does have force powers. Presumably, it gave him extra strength and durability. So again, and I want to be careful because again, in, outside sources, Holdo also has force powers. So you have to be careful of degenerating and just using force powers for everything. But in terms of the plot, I don't see a major issue here, at least in line with other Star Wars films. I mean, you could say, well, Empire Strikes Back was much more coherent, and I would concede that. But in terms of what they're using, in terms of the wonkiness of the force or the equipment or the AT-ATs, it's like, this doesn't seem radically off from the other films. And like I said, I think the throne room scene does have a few errors, and that's worth going through. But yeah, I don't see the issue here. The final thing would be, well, the dialogue itself is objectively the worst, which he makes that clear, right? He even concedes the line with Anakin about the sand, being rough and coarse was really bad, but Rose is far worse. Well, I'm not going to go through all the prequels or even OT, but there's a lot worse dialogue than Rose, so that seems to be just pure subjectiveness to say this is the worst dialogue. But some may agree with that, but I think there's unfortunately a lot of competitors for the worst dialogue in Star Wars. In any case, it doesn't really affect the plot issue, but there you go. So, okay, I think I've dealt fairly with the Rose-Finn controversy at the end of The Last Jedi. This is closing out Mauler's Part 3. I'm going to do a few more reviews. I'm going to deal with Kylo, the throne room, and a few other things. But yeah, I still don't see the major killer blow that he's delivering against The Last Jedi. I mean, he also mentioned something about Phasma and a continuity issue with her body, but this is after the crash, so I don't see that as a major one, but I'll go through that as well. Alright, this has been Star Wars Analyzed on Part 3 of the Mauler critique in The Last Jedi. If you like the content, please hit the like button and or subscribe. Thanks for listening. Please be safe.